Hi everybody, thanks for visiting my channel. My name is Zach and I am an arts administrator and photographer living in Santa Barbara, California. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the director of operations and staff photographer at the opera company here. I produce and shoot all of the photos that we use at the opera and our marketing materials, and I also shoot all of the images for our production photo archive. I also have my own photo business where I shoot mostly portraiture and lifestyle photos. So during this time while we're quarantined at home, I've been sorting through my old photo shoots, and I wanted to bring you a proper editing tutorial of some of my favorite images. So for today's tutorial, we are going to look at a picture of my friends Taja and Cody that we shot back in August of 2018 here in Santa Barbara. This was for a publication. It was a fashion magazine, and the edition that we shot for was on the theme of hats. So in this video, I'm gonna take you through my process. We're gonna start with the prep work that led to this photo shoot. Then we're gonna take one of our final selects, bring it into Lightroom, give it a color, and then we're gonna take that image into Photoshop to apply a final texture to really achieve the look that we're going for to tell the story that we want to tell. So let's start at the beginning, the concept. Concept is really important when you're thinking about your photo shoot. In this case, we were shooting images that were to be published in a fashion magazine with the theme hats. So before any of my photo shoots, I usually go onto Instagram or I browse the web, just looking for photos that really inspire me, that speak to me. I love to do this on Instagram by saving photos to a collection. So you can see here, this is my hats collection where I have a bunch of images that have the vibe of what I'm envisioning in my mind. I wanted to create a sort of neo-Western look, not a Western like John Wayne look, but something reminiscent of the idea of the American West. So we've got a Western vibe. I have my location in mind, which is just the hills a little ways away from my house here in Santa Barbara, California. The models and I will text back and forth to see what they have in their closet, what they can bring to the shoot, and we sort of go from there. In this case, we used what they had with them. They basically acted as the fashion designer for this photo shoot, and it ended up working perfectly for the images that I wanted to create. So we're gonna open Adobe Lightroom. Here is the image of my friend Taja and Cody. Normally I would start with one of my presets. These are my film presets, which I think would work really well for this photo. But for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm gonna take you through Lightroom and some of the color editing I would do here. So we're gonna start up top with our basic panel. There is a little bit of overexposure up in the top left corner there. We can go ahead and fix that here in the basic panel. So I'm just bringing up the exposure overall a little bit, and then I'm going to drop down the highlights to recover some detail. I'm going to also drop the whites to recover detail from the whitest part of the photo, but not all the way. We'll bring up the shadows a bit. The blacks we can take down a bit. Tone curve is where a lot of the magic happens. So I'm starting here with just a basic curve in the RGB channel. You can already see it's starting to make a difference. I'm constantly moving from the curves to the basic panel to sort of even things out as I make changes in each of these locations. Now, I love moving to the specific channels in the curve. Here I'm adjusting the red channel. I'll create a similar curve in the green channel. We don't want to go overboard here. The curve is a really powerful tool. We're trying to put color where we want it and pull it out of where we don't want it. So you can see I made a similar curve in each of the color channels in the curves. Now I'm just headed back up to my basic panel to do some further adjustments. The RGB channel can really help with contrast and light. I find that a simple S-curve does wonders. So I'm liking that. We're gonna move into our hue, saturation, and luminance panel. I'm just adjusting the hues here. Remember, we're going for a sort of old-timey faded Western look. So especially in this, the yellows and greens, I'm gonna make those more orange. I don't want this to feel like springtime in California. I want it to feel more like we're in the desert somewhere. Now, camera calibration is really interesting. You can achieve some pretty fantastic effects in this panel. Again, don't go overboard because you can affect the skin tones quite a bit. I want to keep them looking as natural as possible here. So you can see I'm constantly going back to the curves panel to adjust. Here I'm dropping the shadows a little bit and raising those blacks to create that faded look. There's a before and after for you. Texture and clarity are a bit of a personal preference. I usually add a little bit. I think for a photo like this, it's totally fine to include a little bit. So you can see we're bringing a lot more light onto them. It's a lot more vibrant. Here in luminance, you can bring up the brightness of their skin a little bit. Now we're moving into split toning. Split toning, again, can work wonders when it comes to color, but don't overdo it. I'm feeling like the image is just a little bit too pink, so I'm gonna bring in some more greens and oranges to sort of even that out a bit. There we go. Maybe that's a little bit too green, so we can sort of change that hue, bring down the saturation a little bit. So I like to add some sharpening, decrease the detail since there are people in the shot. If you hold Option and drag the masking slider, you can see where the sharpening is occurring. I like to keep it really fine so that the entire image isn't sharpened, just those edges are sharpened. Now, finally, grain. I love grain. I think it really adds so much story to an image, especially one like this. So we're gonna add some grain. I keep my level there about 25 and really increase the size and the roughness of the grain to create an interesting look. So I'm not quite done here. We're gonna move forward and make some local adjustments. So I'm finding that they're not really sticking out from the background as much as I would like. So I'm gonna paint over them and just increase their exposure a little bit so that they're a little bit brighter than that background. I'm clicking Show Selected Overlay down in the bottom left so I can see where I'm painting. And now I can make this adjustment only to them. I'm gonna brighten them up a little bit, pull them out from that background. That looks great. One thing that I mentioned at the beginning is that the sky, especially in the upper left-hand corner, is a little bit blown out. So to sort of help that a bit, I'm gonna add a graduated filter and just decrease the whites and the highlights and the exposure a bit, just to bring down that sky so it's not distracting. That's looking pretty good. So now that our photo is colored, I brought him into Photoshop to apply our last minute retouches and our texture. So there's not really a lot on this picture that I want to retouch. I think just adding that texture is gonna help a lot. The best textures to use in your photography are high resolution captures of, well, texture. It can be anything: sand, wood, grain, dust, rust, you name it. In this case, I was using high-res images of dust and scratches textures to emulate the feel of an old physical photograph. We were going for that analog look. So let's go to my folder of textures. I've saved a few here in my Creative Cloud drive. I did this so that I can use these textures on my iPad as well as on my Mac, my MacBook, wherever I am. These textures are saved in the cloud, so I can use them whenever I need them. Film dust textures, here they are. We're gonna start down here with photo scratches. These two are from Phlearn.com. I've just clicked on them and you just drag them onto our image. Great, so they appear now as their own layers. We're gonna rotate this here. If you hold Shift while you rotate, it'll only let you rotate at 15-degree increments, so you can rotate from vertical to horizontal pretty accurately. Now I'm gonna hold Shift again and just stretch this out so that it fills our entire canvas. So now I'm gonna press F to bring us into full screen so we can really see what's going on here. Okay, so this is just a picture of this texture. How do we use this with our image? Well, the answer is in blending modes. So if you go down here to your blending mode, right now it's on normal, but if we moved it to something like screen, there we go, we can see our image. Now the other texture here, we need to also do the same thing. So transform, I'm holding Shift and I am turning this guy around. Now we'll drag it out to fill our entire image. There we go. Now let's also make this screen, and there is our picture. So this is not perfect. What has this done? This has sort of really, if we look at the original image, I'm doing this by pressing Option and then clicking on the eyeball. There's a lot more color, it's a lot more saturated, it looks a lot better. So we can go ahead and experiment here. Let's just start with one texture. So this is our photo scratches layer, number 2. Here's screen. Let's move to lighten. Lighten does a little bit better of a job. It doesn't wash the image out as much. Let's do the same with this other layer, lighten. And now we can see we have some pretty great scratches on this picture, but I'm sort of missing the scratches one. I can't really see them very well. So I'm gonna turn this back to screen. And there they are. You can see them up in the top right corner. Let's just for comparison turn them to lighten. You can't really see them up there. So I'm gonna leave this on screen, but I don't want this to wash out my entire image. So one way to really enhance textures and customize them is by creating a layer mask and painting out any part of the image that you don't want that texture visible. So we're gonna do that in two ways. And for this photo scratches one layer, I'm gonna paint out most of the texture except for the corners, because most of this texture is only appearing in the corners. So I'm hitting B for my brush tool. Here I'm gonna paint with black on this white layer mask. Right now my flow is at 20, opacity 100. I'm gonna hold Control and Option and click and drag to the right to make a really big brush. I'm just gonna sort of click, and you can already see that some of that color is coming back on our subjects. That's great. So that's looking pretty great. So I've just masked them out of that texture so they're not being affected. Now let's look at photo scratches 2. Okay, this looks pretty good. Let's look at the comparison between screen and lighten. I think we're gonna keep it on lighten, but I don't want so much happening here in the middle of our image with these scratches going across them, even like across his face. We really don't want anything to be distracting. So using that same technique, we're gonna create a layer mask, use a large soft brush, and just brush out some of that texture there away from our subjects. Definitely don't want it across their face. We don't want the texture to be distracting. We want it to help us tell the story that we're telling, to emphasize what we want it to emphasize and not distract from the overall message. All right, so let's look at this. That looks great. I'm pretty happy with this. So we're gonna save it. All right, so now let's look at a before and after. So here's a before and here's an after. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. I hope this video was helpful. So I really find that textures can be effective at communicating the story that you want to tell with your images. So I encourage you to find some textures, experiment with them in your photography. Remember, we don't want the texture to distract from the image itself or to distract from the story. Textures are tools to help us communicate through our images, and they should be used that way. If you saw in my photo, the texture wasn't the focus, but it just helped to create that analog feel, that old Western feel that I was going for. Experiment with different textures and different blending modes. I find that there's not really a right way to do it. It's just a matter of experimenting and finding what works for the story that you are trying to tell. That's all for now. Thanks so much for watching. See you in the next one. Bye.